Today I'm going to be showing you how to set up a mining pool, and the purpose of this video is pretty much so that you can start solo mining coins yourself. Now you can certainly provide this as a service to other users, whether you have a community or whether you kind of want to form it into a business. We won't really be covering those aspects of it, but we'll essentially be getting it up and running on a VPS and get mining to it. And we're only going to use one coin, so right now you can see kind of an overview of my current community pool, and you can see we've got 3 different coins on here, with Coin having both PPLNS options and solo options. And I like to use MiningCore. MiningCore is a kind of a open source package written in .NET Core that can be deployed on pretty much any OS. It is cross-platform. And it kind of has everything built in for you all in one package already. And it even supports proof of stake, where you can kind of have POS coins that can pay out to some of your end users, which is really cool, especially for coins that are like hybrid proof of work, proof of stake. You could actually, they can mine, and then if you have a higher payout limit set for that user, you're going to be earning staking rewards off of whatever is being held in that pool wallet, and those can be divvied out into the actual miners, which is really cool. It basically gives them an extra incentive to mine to your pool, and that is kind of natively supported within MiningCore. And I do like to use a specific fork of MiningCore by Xialin1579, real popular user on GitHub that has provided lots of enhancements to different mining pool applications. I prefer MiningCore personally. Again, written in .NET, and my history and my experience is pretty much all surrounding .NET, and I just find it most user-friendly for me personally to use. So to get this started, I'm over on Vultr, and I'm going to deploy a new VPS for this tutorial. If you have a mini PC or your own VM you want to use, it's perfectly fine for this. That's actually how I recommend doing it if you just want your own pool at home. It does not need to be accessible over the internet. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to do cloud compute. I'm going to do regular performance. And I'm going to do Atlanta. And we're going to do, I like to do Ubuntu 20.04. If you notice, they don't have 18.04. 18.04 will generally be more compatible with all of the older coins. A lot of the newer coins have native support for 20.04 and newer, but a lot of the legacy coins that are forks of Bitcoin may not have that. And I'm going to spin this up with, I'm going to do 2 vCPUs, 2 gigs of memory, and 3 terabytes of bandwidth. This is probably a good one to go with. I personally run my mining pools on Contabo. Contabo will give you, I think it's 4 vCPUs and 8 gigs of RAM for $8.29 a month. It's a really good deal. If you are serious about hosting this over the internet and having people connect to it, I would recommend Contabo. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to use Vultr because it's easier to do. And we're going to disable backups so that we can save $3 a month. And we can give this a name. I'm just going to call this thing Mining Pool Tutorial. We're going to say deploy now. We're going to give this a few minutes, and it's going to deploy, and it's going to set up a mining pool, or it's going to set up a VPS for us, which will be able to connect with PuTTY. If you don't already have PuTTY installed, make sure you download it. You can get it just by Googling PuTTY. I'm not going to cover the install of that utility. It's a very common SSH utility. And after a few minutes, it will switch to running. That tells us that it is set up. Now, as soon as it switches over to running, it may still be setting things up. So you may want to give it, 10 to 20 minutes or so, just to know that everything is set up. But once everything's set up, you can hop on over, click on it, and you're going to see the IP address. We're going to use this SSH in. It's going to show us our username as root, and we can just hit copy, and that's going to copy our password. And I'm going to open up PuTTY. Once PuTTY opens, we're just going to go ahead and plug in the IP address. Hit enter. And then hit accept on the pop-up. Then we're going to type in our username of root. And we're going to copy that password. Right click to paste it and hit enter. And it's going to log us in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a free -m, check our RAM out. We only have 2 gigs, but you can see it auto created us a swap file of around 6.4 gigs. I'm not sure where that estimate came from, but we do have that, so we've got plenty of swap space. And the first thing I'd like to do is we're going to go ahead and run a sudo apt update and also a apt upgrade. Let's go ahead and get all the packages up to date if there are any. And it looks like there are a bunch of packages updated, so we're going to hit Y to go ahead and update those. Alright, once things are updated, the next thing we want to do is we want to do a sudo ufw. So this is basically the firewall. And we're going to do status. And here we can see it's active, which is good. And it's got port 22 allowed through it so that we're able to SSH into it. So that is all good. If that's disabled, you're going to want to go ahead and enable that. Very important. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a user account for our pool. So I'm going to do sudo adduser, and I'm just going to name this pool. And it's going to ask us to define a password and to confirm it. And we're just going to call this pool user. And we hit enter through all of that, hit yes. And now we want to make sure that that pool user has sudo permissions. So to do that, we're going to do a sudo usermod -a for add, capital G for group, and do sudo, and then our user ID. Okay, once that's done, we can do a switch user -pool. This will switch over to that pool account. And there's a few things that we want to install in order to run MiningCore. So we're going to go sudo apt install. We want wget, we want unzip, we want git, we want the postgresql app. We also want screen, and we want nginx. Let's go ahead and install those, enter our password for our pool account. And it's going to go ahead and download and install those. Alright, once that's done, you might see this red line here. That's perfectly fine. It's just a delayed startup during the install. It's perfectly fine. Postgres is up and running. Next thing is to figure out what coin you are going to want to mine and run a pool for. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to download the daemon node, get the blockchain synced up, and configure it so that our mining pool software can connect to that node. It's going to run a wallet, and that's basically going to become our pool wallet. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use Pigeoncoin. So let's go ahead and hop on over to the Pigeoncoin GitHub. We're going to pull up the Pigeoncoin repository. We're going to go to the releases section. And we're going to find if there's multiple Ubuntu versions. So the first thing we're looking for is the tar-gz for Ubuntu or for Linux. And if there are multiple versions, make sure you grab the right version. So Pigeoncoin puts out a one for version 18 and one for version 20. We're going to go ahead and grab 20. We're just going to right click on it, do copy link address. This is just like setting up a master node. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a wget command. We're going to paste in that. Now if we do an ls, we can see we have this tar file. So we're going to go ahead and do a tar. I'm going to do a zxvf on pigeon. That's going to extract everything. And then we can see everything's in this pigeon-build folder. So let's go ahead and do a cd into pigeon-build. And what I like to do is I like to move or copy the daemon and also the CLI. So let's go ahead and do a move on pigeon. We'll just start with the CLI. We're going to move this thing to /user/local/bin. Oops, you need to do a sudo on that. And we're going to do the same thing with the daemon. By moving these, you don't have to specify the full path to run the file. And now we're going to move back up a folder. And we're going to remove the pigeon archive that we downloaded. And we're also going to do a sudo rm-r on the pigeon build folder. That'll go ahead and get rid of that. And now what I like to do is I like to just run the daemon real quick and stop it. So we're just going to do pigeond. Let this run for a few seconds. And then we're going to do a Control-C. That's going to stop it. And now if we do an ls space dot and a hit tab twice, we can see that we now have this Pigeoncore folder. So we're going to go ahead and go into that. So we're going to do a cd.pigeoncore. And if we look in here, we've got a bunch of files, one of which is the pigeon.conf file. We're going to go ahead and do a nano on that file. And then here, you're going to notice it's blank. We need to populate this with a few lines. The first thing we want to do is we want to do daemon equals 1. We want to do server equals 1. We want to do listen equals 1. These make sure that the RPC service is running so that our pool software can actually communicate with the daemon through an API. And then we need to specify an rpcport. For me, I like to pick a range and kind of sequentially use that range. So I'm going to use port 7001. This can be any port that you're not using already on the system. And then we want to do rpcuser equals and give this a username. I'm just going to call this pgnuser for now. It's perfectly fine for the tutorial, but you might want to make it something more unique. And then we're going to do rpcpassword equals, and I'm just going to do pgnpassword. Then we can do ctrl-x, y, enter to save. And now I like to create a service for this. So to do that, we're going to do sudo nano etc systemd/system/ and then whatever we want the service to call. I use the tickers for the coins, so I do pgn.service. Hit enter. And then we need to create a file. We're going to start with a unit tag. And then we need to give that a description, so we're just going to call this Pigeoncoin service. Then we need to tell it when to run. We want it to run after the network is live. What this means is on a reboot, when will that service actually start back up? It needs a network connection, so we're telling it to wait till after network connection's there. We want a type of forking under the service tag, and then our user, this is going to be the user we want to run under. Same thing with group. So those will both be the same. And then our working directory is going to be our Pigeoncore folder. So that's going to be /home/pool, which is our user ID, .pigeoncore. And then you can put the ending slash in there. And then we need an execute start. So ExecStart equals. And we're going to give this the full path to user local bin /pigeond. And we want to do -daemon. And then on execute stop, and do something similar. This one we want to do /usr/local/bin /pigeon-cli instead of the daemon space stop. And this will actually stop that daemon. Then we're going to do a restart of always private temp of true. Timeout stop in seconds. I like to do 60 seconds here. So we just do a 60s. And then timeout start in seconds. I like to do 10 seconds. And then we can do our start limit interval. We can do 2 minutes on that. So we'll do start limit interval equals 120s. And then our start limit burst, we're going to do 5. And what the burst is if the service continues to restart over and over again rapidly, it'll only attempt that 5 times. And then we need our install tag. And for this one, it's going to be wanted by, we want multi-user.target under that attribute. So we've got our unit attribute, our service attribute, and our install attribute. Go ahead and do ctrl-x, y, enter to save. And now you can do sudo systemctl daemon-reload. And then you want to do sudo systemctl enable pgn.service. Okay. And now we can say start pgn.service. And now the service is starting, and it should be syncing the blockchain. So to test that, we can do tail -f for a follow, do /home/pool /.pigeoncore, which is that folder it created, /debug.log. And it's going to take a few moments to connect to some peers. And what you're going to see is like this -0.25 on the nsync process. This is because it is syncing the headers. So you just need to let this be. It is working. It's kind of working in the background, even though you're not seeing progress here. Once the headers are synced, it's going to start syncing it block by block. And then we will resume once all of the blocks are synced. We want to make sure the daemon is fully synced before we start setting up the pool. So I will see you back when this is synced. This may take a few hours for me. Once the daemon is fully synced, we can see that by saying progress is 1.00. Just do Ctrl-C to close out that tail command. And now we want to set up the actual mining pool. So to do that, I'm going to do a change directory to /home/pool. Go back to our user folder. And then we're going to do a git clone on the repository. So that's just going to be git clone, https://github.com/xylin1579/miningcore.git. Go ahead and hit enter, and that's going to download the repository. And then we can do a cd MiningCore to move into that folder. And you're going to see a couple build files here. Based on whatever version of Ubuntu you're running, you're going to run that build file. So we're on 2004, so that's the one we're going to run. I'm just going to do a /build-ubuntu 20.04. And we're going to go ahead and hit enter. And that's going to ask us for our password, because this does need to run with elevated permissions. Again, this is the password for the pool account. So you go ahead and specify that. And this is going to go through, install the Microsoft.NET runtime if it's not already installed. And then it's going to ripple through, compile the entire application. So be patient. This may take several minutes to do. And I'll see you back when it is complete. Alright, once that's done, we just want to make sure Postgres is up and running. So I'm going to do a sudo systemctl start postgres at 12-main. And that's just going to start the service if it's not already up and running. And then we're going to do a sudo -u postgres space psql. What this is going to do is this is going to run the Postgres command line as the Postgres service account. We're going to go ahead and do that. And now what we want to do is we want to create a role, which is essentially a user, and then also a database. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to do create role, and then we're going to give the role a name, which is essentially going to be like the user name. I'm going to call that MiningCore. And then we're going to say with login encrypted password. And now we need to define a password for that account. I'm just going to call it MiningCore. And I do recommend keeping the role as MiningCore. Password can be anything you want, really. But the reason we're doing this is there's a kind of a setup script that we're going to be running in a minute that has MiningCore as the role names in there. And it just makes things a lot easier if you keep the names the same. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to hit enter. It's going to create that role. Then we're going to do a create database. And we're going to name this MiningCore as well. I'm just going to do MiningCore. And then we're going to do owner. And we're going to use the MiningCore role that we had created. That's going to create the database. And now we're going to do a /q to quit. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move up a folder. So I'm going to go back to my home directory. So we're going to do /home/pull. And then we want to run the database installer script. So to do that, we're going to do sudo -u postgres psql -d MiningCore, which is our database name, -f, which tells it we're going to specify a input file that we want it to run. And that's going to be MiningCore/source/MiningCore/persistence/postgres/scripts/createdb.sql. We're going to go ahead and run that. And here you can see it created a bunch of tables and a bunch of indexes. This is basically creating our data structure for the pool, where it's going to store the shares, it's going to store pending payments, things like that. Now what we need to do is we need to set up a file that's basically going to be our JSON file. This is going to contain the definition of our mining pool, the coins that are supported, the wallets to use, how to handle payments, how to connect to the daemons, things like that. So I'm just going to do nano pool.json. We're going to hit enter. This is going to create an empty file. And this is where things can get complicated or simple depending on how you want to configure it. There are some examples in the GitHub. So if you head on over to the MiningCore GitHub and scroll to the top, you're going to see this examples folder. If you go ahead and click this, you're going to see several examples in here. Ravencoin's a good starting point for like Pigeon. You can literally copy and paste all of this and change some things. But I already have a sample copied, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that. We can walk through the settings. So the first thing is your logging. This is kind of just for debugging how you want it to log out. And then you also have banning. This will control whether miners get banned for rapid reconnect attempts, things like that. Notifications. If you do want notifications turned on, you can do that, including every time a block is found. I do not recommend turning those on. It'll be more of a pain than anything else. Under this persistence, we're using Postgres, and we're using all the defaults, so we can leave all this as is. But if you used a different database name, you could specify that here. Our payment processor we want to turn on, so we have that set as true. And this is the number of seconds that you want that payment processor to run. Typically, I do 3600 here, and that'll essentially send payments every hour. And then there's a share recovery file. In the event the database is down when a share is submitted, it will use this file as temp storage till that database comes back online. It prevents any type of shares from getting lost in the event the database goes down. And then this is the port that the API is going to listen on, you will want to turn API on if you want to add it to mining pool stats, and also if you want a web front end for your pool. If you only care about the back end, you can turn that off. The listen port of the 0.0.0.0 just tells it to listen on every port. And if we scroll down a little bit more, here you can see the rate limiting. I have that turned off right now. And if we keep scrolling down, what you're going to see is there is a nice hash support here that you can do the auto diff for nice hash. It does work pretty well. I have used nice hash rental on my pools before and never ran into a problem. Now what we need to do is we need to define our pools, and that's what this section is here. So we're just going to create one. We're going to call it pigeon1. You need to give a unique ID. We want it enabled, obviously. The coin needs to be Pigeoncoin. And this name needs to match what was in the coins file that we referenced earlier that is on the GitHub. Address we're going to come back to in a minute. Essentially, we're going to need to generate an address from our daemon/wallet that we've just synchronized, and we'll be plugging in that address here. The reward recipient doesn't need to be your pool address. However, I do recommend making it your pool address. Just that way you have enough funds to cover transaction fees, things like that. You can have multiple fee reward recipients if you want. The block refresh interval, I usually leave as 2 minutes. Client connection timeout, I usually leave as 5 minutes. Banning, I usually just leave this as default. It'll ban for 5 minutes if they submit more than 50% invalid shares. And then the ports, these are the actual stratum ports that the miner is going to connect to. So in this case, I'm using port 4600. And I'm just calling it GPU. This is it's kind of a label. And my starting difficulty is 1. And this is a variable difficulty with the min being 0.1 and there being no maximum. It's going to retarget 15. Sorry, the target times 15. The retarget is 90. And then the variance percentage is 30. And this is kind of going to let the miner and the pool work out the difficulties of the shares that it needs to be submitting. And then for the daemon, this is the actual connection to the wallet daemon. So if you remember earlier, we set port 7001 and we used pigeon-user and pgn.password for the passwords. We want those to be the same. And the payment processor for this specific coin is turned on, and we're using PPLNS. This you can change to PPS, PPS Plus. You can set it to solo if you just want to do solo mining. If you're the only one connected to the pool, it's essentially solo mining whether you do PPLNS or solo. It's only when people really start connecting if you want PPLNS versus solo versus PPS. It also supports prop. It pretty much supports all the standards. Once this is done, we're going to do ctrl-x, y, enter to save. Now, we need to generate our pigeon address. So to do that, we're going to do pigeon-cli get new address. And this is going to give us an address. We're going to go ahead and copy this. And then we're going to do nano pool.json again. And we're going to go in here. And we're going to go down to where the addresses are. And we're going to put in that pool address. And then for the rewards recipient, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and plug that in, do ctrl-x, y, enter to save. And now our pool config file is created. Now what I like to do is I like to create a service to run the mining pool software on. So this will run in addition to the daemon. So to do that, we're going to do a sudo nano /etc/systemd/system. And we're going to call this MiningCore.service. And it's going to be very similar to the pigeon service that we created for the daemon earlier. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this in a little bit. Looks like I forgot the last line. And really what you're going to notice here, the only difference is obviously the description's a little bit different there. The working directory is going to be /home/pool. The starting and stopping executables, we're going to be running a screen session. We're going to be naming it MiningCore. And we're going to be starting up this MiningCore service. And we're giving it the config file that we created as an argument. And then whenever we stop the service, we want it to gracefully shut down that screen session. So do ctrl-x, y, enter to save. And now, similar to what we had to do with the pigeon one, we need to do a systemctl daemon reload. Anytime you make a change to those service files, you want to do a daemon reload. And then we can do enable MiningCore. Okay. And then we can do start MiningCore. And now the MiningCore service should be starting up. To test this, we can do screen-r MiningCore. And what we should see is that everything is online. And here you can see Stratum ports 4600 is online. And it looks like everything is up and running. So you do Control-A and then a D. That will exit out of that. Now before we set up the web UI, what I like to do is do a UFW status. Oops, sudo UFW status. And if you notice, our API port's not open, and also our mining port's not open. So let's go ahead and do those first. So we're going to do UFW allow 4600/TCP. This is the port that we're going to mine on. And then if you want to submit this to mining pool stats, then you're also going to want to open up the API port, which is port 5000 by default. So we're going to go ahead and do that as well. And if we want to test the API, we can go ahead and hop over to our browser. And actually, before we do that, let's grab our IP address. If you ever want to grab your IP address, you can do a curl ifconfig.me. This will give you your public IP address. So we're going to go ahead and do http:// that IP address :5000/API/pools. And what we should see is our pigeon pool is up and running. And this is the URL that you would give mining pool stats. So when it comes time to wanting to submit it to mining pool stats, if you wish to do that, all you have to do is hop on over to mining pool stats, find your coin. So in our case, it would be pigeon. And down here at the bottom, you can put your pool URL, which is going to be the URL to the web UI. But then under the API URL, you'll be able to just copy this whole thing and put it in here. Now, I do recommend switching to a domain name versus using the direct IP. I'm not going to cover DNS configuration in this video, but that is something that I recommend before you submit it. However, you can submit IP and it will work. We do see pools that use just IPs and they get less traffic, but people still use them. So now let's set up the web UI front end. So to do the web UI, I like to do cd/home/pool. Let's make sure we're in that root folder again. And then we're going to do a git clone on github.com/btclinux/miningcore.webui.git. This is the one I recommend starting with. It's kind of the easiest to get started with and configure. And then we're going to do a nano MiningCore web UI/js/miningcore.js. Now this file contains, at the very top here, some things that we need to change to basically point it to our API. And that is this var API line. So for me, I'm going to hop back over to this, and I'm going to grab that API base URL that we tested. And in here, I'm just going to replace this with that. And we want to make sure we have the ending slash in there. And then once you do that, should be really all you have to change there. Down here, if you want to use a different host name for your stratum addresses and for your website, you can define all those there. But for us, this is all that we need. We're just going to use the IP address today. And now what we want to do is we want to do a sudo nano on /etc/nginx/sites-enabled/default. And this is a web server that we're going to be modifying. And what we're looking for is there should be a root path section in here, which is this line right here. And we're going to change the /var/www/html. So instead of that, we are going to use /home/pool/MiningCore.webui. Do ctrl-x or y, hit enter. Now we have to restart the MiningCore service, or sorry, the nginx service rather. So to do that, we just need to do a sudo systemctl restart nginx.service. And now we want to make sure that we open up port 80. So we're going to do a sudo ufw allow 80/tcp. Okay. Now what should happen is if we hop on over here and we remove the port number and we just go to the base URL, here you can see we have our web UI up and running. We can see our fee is 0.5%. It's got our hash rate. If you notice we're missing our logo, we will remedy that in a minute. But if we click on here we can see it shows us the current pool effort, our minimum payout, which was defined in that config file. And then if we go down to connect, right here you can see the endpoint that the miner needs to connect to. So before we start mining to it, let's go ahead and figure out how we can get a logo here. What I typically do is I just head on over to CoinMarketCap and I search for the coin. So in this case, it's going to be Pigeon. And then on the logo, you can just right click and do copy image address. And then let's hop back on over to our SSH window. And we're going to move into the MiningCore folder. So I'm going to do cd miningcore.webui /img/coin. If we do an ls on this folder, /icon, we need to move into the icon folder. If you do an ls, here you're going to notice all these different icons for each coin. All you need to do is download the file that we just copied into this folder. So to do that, we can just do a wget -O, and then we can name this pigeon.png. And we can paste in the URL. That's going to go ahead and download it there. Now if we hop back on over to our web UI and give this a refresh, you can see we now have our logo. It's going to show here. It's also going to show here. And everything looks good. So now we're going to hop on over to Hive OS and configure a flight sheet. So let me go ahead and grab this. And I have an existing Pigeon flight sheet that I'm actually going to duplicate. And then we're going to hit edit. And so our coin is Pigeon. Our wallet is our Pigeon wallet. Our pool, we want to do configure in miner. I'm on NVIDIA, so I'm using T-Rex. If you're on AMD, you'll want to use WildRig. We're going to do setup miner config. And here in the pool URL, we need to put the full stratum. So it's going to be shroud plus CCP : your // your IP address : your port number, which we did port 4600. And you might need to use an older version of T-Rex, which is what we are doing here. We're using a specific version. And you can leave wallet as the macroed wallet. Worker name is the macroed worker name. Go ahead and hit apply changes. Then we're going to hit update here. And then we're going to launch this flight sheet. And here we can see it's submitting shares. They're getting accepted. And if we hop on over to the pool, now the pool UI may take a minute, but here you can see it already detected. We have one miner detected. The hash rate's still kind of low. It will ramp up. Eventually that will ramp up to 105 mega hash a sec, or whatever I'm mining at right now. Yeah, around just under 105. And so if we hop back on over there, we will see it start to ramp up. The hash rate and the statistics update every couple minutes, so don't expect it to be true real time, but it will be pretty close. It'll be, within 5 minutes. It's been a few minutes. If we head on over to blocks, here we can see we actually hit 2 blocks relatively close together, block 607 and block 610. This will take a while to get some confirmations, and then once those hit 100, it will be eligible for payout. So everything is working. We're continuing to submit hashes. And if we hop on over and we grab our address and we go to dashboard, we can actually plug in our wallet address here, hit load wallet stats, and here you can see we have our worker and we have our pending shares. Once those blocks get confirmed, that'll move the pending balance, and if it's above the threshold, which it will be for me right now because I'm the only person mining and we have a low threshold set, then it will pay me out whenever that hour mark hits. And then you can also see your lifetime balance. This is the lifetime since the pool's been up and running that I have earned. So that includes both payouts and basically everything that has been earned that is a confirmed block. That's it for the mining pool. Just a couple important things to keep in mind is make sure you're only opening the ports on your server that you absolutely have to. Make sure you're keeping an eye on the database, especially shares. Make sure everything is up, it's stable, you're not getting security attacks. Setting up the pool is the easiest part. The hardest part is maintaining it. There's so much I didn't cover in this video, but I just kind of wanted to show you how you can set up your own mining pool. If you just want to use it for solo mining, great. If you want to put it out there for other people to use, that's great as well. This should help you get started.